The golden horizon of New Mexico stretched endlessly as Scarlett Dawson watched the silhouette of her husband disappear with another woman, their figures growing smaller against the setting sun. Her tears had dried hours ago, leaving only a hollow ache where her heart used to be. It was 1878 in Abiquiu, a town nestled in the rugged wilderness of the territory, where she stood alone on the porch of what was once their shared home. "He ain't coming back this time," she whispered to herself, the truth of it settling into her bones like the desert cold. Scarlett had suspected for months that Thomas had been unfaithful. The late nights at the saloon, the lingering scent of perfume that wasn't hers, the way his eyes would drift when that woman Lillian Moore entered a room. Still, nothing had prepared her for the sight of him packing his belongings onto his horse, Lillian waiting astride her mare, both of them leaving without so much as a backward glance. 3 years of marriage dissolved like morning mist under the harsh New Mexico sun. At 25, Scarlett was now alone with a small ranch to manage, dwindling funds, and a reputation as an abandoned wife in a town where gossip traveled faster than the stagecoach. As darkness fell, she finally turned away from the empty road and stepped back into the house. The silence was deafening. Thomas had taken most of their money, leaving behind only furniture too heavy to carry and memories too painful to keep. Scarlett sat at the kitchen table, where a half-eaten breakfast still sat from that morning before her world had shattered. With trembling hands, she gathered the dishes and began to wash them. There was work to be done, animals to feed, and somehow a life to rebuild. She wouldn't allow herself to crumble, not when the ranch still needed tending. Thomas might have abandoned her, but she wouldn't abandon what remained. The next morning arrived with cruel brightness. Scarlett dressed mechanically in her work clothes, a simple skirt and blouse that had seen better days, and headed to the barn. The 2 milk cows lowed in greeting, unaware that their world had changed. The chickens scratched impatiently, and the single plow horse, an aging gelding named Samson, nickered softly. "At least you stayed," she murmured, stroking his velvet nose. After the morning chores, Scarlett hitched Samson to the wagon. They needed supplies, and facing the town was inevitable. She steeled herself against the stares and whispers that would greet her. Abiquiu wasn't large, which meant everyone would already know her shame. The main street was busy with the usual morning activities: merchants arranging goods, cowboys leading horses to the blacksmith, and women gathering at the general store. Scarlett kept her chin high as she guided the wagon to Harmon's general store, but she couldn't miss the sudden hush that fell as she approached, nor the pitying glances exchanged between onlookers. Mrs. Harmon, a stout woman with graying hair and kind eyes, greeted her with forced cheer. "Scarlett, dear, what can I get for you today?" "Just the usual supplies, Mrs. Harmon," Scarlett replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "And perhaps some extra coffee." The older woman nodded, busying herself with gathering items. "Of course, dear. And you know, if there's anything you need, anything at all, you just ask." The implicit offer of help made Scarlett's throat tighten. "Thank you, but I'll manage." "I'm sure you will," Mrs. Harmon said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Such a shame about Thomas." "Never thought he'd—" She stopped herself, flushing slightly. "Well, never mind that." Scarlett forced a smile. "It's all right. Everyone knows by now, I expect." "People talk," Mrs. Harmon admitted, "but they'll find something new to gossip about soon enough." As Mrs. Harmon totaled her purchases, Scarlett realized with a sinking feeling that she had less money than expected. Thomas must have taken more than she'd initially thought. "I'm afraid I'll need to put some things back," she said quietly. Mrs. Harmon frowned, then lowered her voice. "Nonsense. Take what you need now and we can settle up later." "I can't accept charity. It's not charity between friends," Mrs. Harmon insisted. "You pay when you can." Swallowing her pride, Scarlett nodded. "Thank you, I won't forget your kindness." Outside, as she loaded her supplies into the wagon, she felt the weight of stares on her back. From the saloon across the street emerged a group of cowhands, fresh off a cattle drive by the look of them, dusty, trail worn, and loud with relief at reaching civilization. One of them, taller than the rest, glanced her way. Their eyes met briefly before Scarlett looked away, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable state. She climbed onto the wagon seat and took up the reins, eager to escape back to the relative sanctuary of her ranch. As she turned the wagon around, the wheel caught in a deep rut, jolting the vehicle. Several packages tumbled from the back, spilling their contents into the dirt. Scarlett bit back a curse and climbed down, aware of the continued stares as she began gathering her scattered goods. A shadow fell across her, and a pair of worn boots entered her field of vision. Looking up, she found herself face to face with the tall cowboy from the saloon. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps late 20s, with sun-weathered skin, dark hair, and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Allow me, madam," he said, his voice carrying the hint of an accent she couldn't place. Without waiting for her response, he began collecting the fallen items, handling them with surprising care for hands that looked more accustomed to ropes and reins than delicate packages. "Thank you," Scarlett managed, rising to her feet. "Vincent Vega," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "Just arrived with the Palmer outfit from Texas." "Scarlett Dawson," she replied, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance and the red rims of her eyes. Vincent nodded, loading the last of the packages securely onto her wagon. "Headed far, just to my ranch south of town, Dawson Ranch," his brow furrowed. "Thought I heard that belonged to a fella named Thomas." The mention of her husband's name caused a fresh wave of pain. It does. "He's my husband." Vincent's expression changed subtly. "Is that so?" he asked, and something in his tone suggested he'd already heard the gossip. Scarlett straightened her shoulders. "Was my husband, I suppose, considering he rode out yesterday with Lillian Moore." She hadn't meant to be so blunt, but there was something about this stranger that made deception seem pointless. To his credit, Vincent didn't offer empty platitudes or uncomfortable pity. "That's rough country to ride alone," he observed, his gaze taking in her slight frame and the heavy work awaiting her. "I'll manage," she said, echoing her earlier words to Mrs. Harmon. Vincent studied her for a moment longer. "I don't doubt it, Mrs. Dawson. Still, if you find yourself needing an extra hand, Palmer's crew will be in Abiquiu for the next few weeks, delivering cattle to the fort." "Thank you, Mr. Vega, but I can't afford to hire help right now." "Didn't mention payment," he said with a slight smile. "Sometimes neighbors just help neighbors." "We're hardly neighbors," Scarlett pointed out. "In the West, anyone within riding distance is a neighbor." He tipped his hat again. "Good day, Mrs. Dawson." As he walked away, Scarlett couldn't help but notice the respectful nods he received from others on the street. Clearly, Vincent Vega had made a favorable impression during his short time in Abiquiu. She pushed the thought aside as she climbed back onto the wagon seat. His kindness was a momentary respite, nothing more. The following days fell into a grueling rhythm. Scarlett woke before dawn, tended to the animals, attempted repairs on the increasingly dilapidated barn, and collapsed into exhausted sleep each night. The work was backbreaking, especially without Thomas's help, but it kept her mind occupied and her grief at bay. A week after Thomas's departure, disaster struck. Scarlett awoke to find Samson lying in his stall, breathing heavily and clearly in pain. Her heart raced with panic as she examined the aging horse, discovering a severe swelling in one leg. "No, no, please," she whispered, stroking his neck. Without Samson, she couldn't plow, couldn't travel to town, couldn't maintain what little remained of her life. After doing what she could to make him comfortable, Scarlett set out on foot for town, determined to fetch the veterinarian. The walk took over an hour under the merciless sun, and by the time she reached Abiquiu, her dress was soaked with sweat and her throat parched with thirst. Dr. Maxwell, who tended to both human and animal ailments in their small community, was out on a call to a distant ranch. His wife promised he would come when he returned, but it might be the next day. Defeated, Scarlett sat on a bench outside the doctor's office, gathering strength for the long walk home. She couldn't afford to linger. The animals needed evening feeding, and there was water to be drawn before nightfall. Mrs. Dawson. She looked up to find Vincent Vega approaching, leading a magnificent chestnut stallion. He was dressed much as before, in a simple shirt, vest, and worn denim pants, with a revolver strapped to his hip, the standard uniform of a working cowboy. "Mr. Vega," she acknowledged, attempting to compose herself. "You're a long way from your ranch," he observed. "Everything all right?" Scarlett hesitated, then decided honesty was simpler than pride. "My horse is sick. I came to fetch Dr. Maxwell, but he's away." Vincent frowned. "What symptoms?" Swelling in his front leg, labored breathing. "He can't stand." "Could be a few things," he said thoughtfully. "I've dealt with my share of horse ailments on the trail. Mind if I take a look?" Hope flickered within her. "You do that," said I would, he replied simply. "Can you ride? We'll get there faster on Rusty here than walking." Scarlett eyed the tall stallion warily. "It's been a while." "He's gentle enough," Vincent assured her, then offered his hand. "Here, I'll help you up." Before she could protest, he had lifted her onto the saddle with surprising ease. He then swung up behind her, his chest warm against her back as he reached around to take the reins. The closeness was startlingly intimate, and Scarlett felt her cheeks flush despite her exhaustion. The ride back to the ranch was swift, with Vincent maintaining a respectful distance while still providing support to ensure she didn't fall. As they approached the small homestead, Scarlett felt a fresh wave of shame at the property's condition: the sagging fence, the weathered clapboards in need of paint, the overgrown garden. Thomas had neglected repairs for months before leaving, preferring to spend his evenings in town. Vincent made no comment as they dismounted. He simply tied Rusty to a post and followed her to the barn, where Samson lay motionless in his stall. Kneeling beside the horse, Vincent examined him with gentle, expert hands, murmuring reassurances as he worked. Scarlett watched anxiously, struck by the contrast between this man's careful touch and her husband's impatient handling of the animals. "Looks like a bad infection," Vincent finally pronounced. "Probably stepped on something sharp that broke off in the hoof. It'll need to be drained and cleaned, and he'll need medicine to fight the fever." "Can you do it?" Scarlett asked, her voice small. Vincent nodded. "I'll need hot water, clean cloth, and whiskey if you have it." "I do," she said, grateful that Thomas had at least left his half-empty bottle behind. For the next hour, Vincent worked methodically, first sedating Samson with whiskey, then carefully extracting a splinter of wood from the horse's hoof and draining the infection. Scarlett assisted as best she could, following his calm instructions and marveling at his competence. "He should recover," Vincent said eventually, washing his hands in the bucket of now dirty water. "But he'll need rest for at least 2 weeks. No pulling, no riding." Scarlett's heart sank. 2 weeks? How will I get to town? How will I work the field?" Vincent dried his hands on a cloth, considering her predicament. "I've got 3 days before I'm needed back with the crew. I could help you with the most pressing work." "I can't ask that of you. You didn't ask. I offered." His gray eyes held her steadily. "And you deserve better than being left to struggle in his shadow." The words struck her like a physical blow. Nobody had acknowledged so directly what Thomas had done to her, abandoning her to face the consequences of his selfishness alone. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. Men, in her experience, rarely offered assistance without expecting something in return. "My mother was left in similar circumstances when I was a boy," Vincent said quietly. "I know what it's like to watch someone you love struggle because a man couldn't honor his commitments." The simple honesty in his explanation disarmed her. "I don't know how I'd repay you." "A meal would be fair exchange," he suggested. "Trail food gets mighty tiresome after weeks on the drive." Despite everything, Scarlett found herself smiling. "I think I can manage that." True to his word, Vincent returned the next morning, riding Rusty and leading a sturdy work horse. "Borrowed him from Mr. Palmer," he explained, Figure we could use the help with the heavier tasks." For the next 3 days, they worked side by side from dawn until dusk. Vincent repaired the barn roof, reinforced the chicken coop against predators, mended the sagging fence, and helped plow the small field where Scarlett hoped to plant a late crop of vegetables. He worked tirelessly, refusing to stop even when she insisted he rest. Each evening, Scarlett prepared the best meal she could manage from her limited supplies. They ate together at her small kitchen table, an arrangement that would have scandalized the town had anyone known, but felt surprisingly natural within the confines of their temporary partnership. During those meals, they talked. Vincent told her about growing up in Pennsylvania, his mother's struggle after his father abandoned them for another woman, and his eventual decision to head west at 17 to find work as a cowboy. He spoke of the vast herds of cattle he'd driven from Texas to Kansas, the dangers of crossing rivers and surviving storms on the open plain, and the camaraderie among the men who chose this nomadic existence. In turn, Scarlett shared stories of her childhood in Missouri, her journey west with her parents who had died of fever shortly after arriving in New Mexico, and her hasty marriage to Thomas at 22, a decision made more from fear of being alone than from genuine affection. "He was charming," she admitted on the third evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mesas in shades of gold and crimson. "And I was young enough to mistake attention for love," Vincent nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Charm is easy, character is harder." "I should have seen the signs," Scarlett sighed. "He started spending more time in town than at home within months of our wedding, said he was looking for business opportunities, but the only opportunity he found was Lillian Moore." "His failings aren't your burden to carry," Vincent said softly. They fell into companionable silence as darkness crept across the land. Stars appeared overhead, more brilliant than Scarlett remembered them being. Had they always shone so brightly, or had she simply forgotten to look up? "I leave tomorrow," Vincent reminded her. "The cattle need to be delivered to the fort, and then we'll be heading back to Texas." Despite having known this was coming, Scarlett felt a surprising pang of loss. In just 3 days, this man had become a friend, perhaps the first real friend she'd had since coming to Abiquiu. "Thank you," she said sincerely, "for everything. Samson is already improving and the ranch looks better than it has in months." "You've got a good start," he agreed, "but there's still the matter of income. What will you do once the immediate work is done?" It was a question Scarlett had been avoiding. "I don't know," she admitted. "Thomas handled the finances. I'm not even sure what I have." Vincent was quiet for a moment. "Might be worth looking through his papers. Most men keep records, even poor ones." The suggestion was practical, but the thought of going through Thomas's things made her stomach tighten with anxiety. Still, Vincent was right. She needed to understand her situation if she was to survive. "I'll do that," she promised. Morning arrived with unwelcome swiftness. Scarlett rose early to prepare a hearty breakfast of eggs, biscuits, and the last of her precious coffee. Vincent joined her, freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt, his damp hair combed neatly back. They ate mostly in silence, both aware of the impending separation. When the meal was finished, Vincent stood and placed his hat on his head. "I've left some supplies in the barn," he said. "Feed for the animals, some tools you might need, and there's a poultice for Samson's leg. Apply it daily until the swelling's gone." "You didn't have to do that," Scarlett protested. "Wanted to," he replied simply. "And I've spoken to Hank at the livery stable in town. He's agreed to send his boy out every few days to check on you until Samson's back on his feet. Boy needs the riding practice, Hank says." Scarlett was overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll be careful," Vincent told her, his gray eyes serious, "and that you'll send word to the fort if you need anything. I'll be there for another 2 weeks before we head south." She nodded, unable to trust her voice. They walked together to where Rusty waited patiently, already saddled and ready for the journey. The borrowed work horse had been returned the previous evening. Vincent checked the cinch on his saddle, adjusted his bedroll, and turned to face her. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Scarlett Dawson," he said formally, extending his hand. She took it, feeling the strength and warmth of his calloused palm against hers. "And you, Vincent Vega." For a moment, neither moved to break the contact. Then Vincent gently released her hand, tipped his hat, and mounted Rusty in one fluid motion. "Remember," he said, looking down at her from the saddle, "you deserve better." With that, he turned his horse and rode away, becoming a diminishing figure against the rising sun, much like Thomas had days earlier. But this departure left Scarlett feeling not abandoned, but strangely fortified. That evening, she finally gathered the courage to enter what had been Thomas's small office, a corner of the house she had rarely entered during their marriage. The desk was cluttered with papers, receipts, and letters, many bearing the perfumed scent that Scarlett now recognized as Lillian's. Hours passed as she sorted through the documents, piecing together the financial history of the ranch. What emerged was disturbing. Thomas had been borrowing money, significant sums, from various sources in town, and the ranch was heavily mortgaged to the Territorial Bank in Santa Fe. Worse, several loans were past due, with threatening letters demanding payment. Scarlett sat back, her heart racing with panic. Thomas hadn't just abandoned her, he'd left her drowning in debt with creditors closing in. The ranch, her home and only security, could be seized at any moment. Sleep eluded her that night as she considered her options. She could attempt to sell the ranch, but who would buy a property so encumbered by debt? She could seek employment in town, but the respectable positions for women were few, and many would refuse to hire an abandoned wife whose reputation was already compromised. Dawn found her exhausted but resolute. She would go to town and speak directly with the creditors. Perhaps they would grant her time to find a solution. Samson was still unfit to travel, so Scarlett walked to Abiquiu, rehearsing her arguments as the sun climbed higher in the sky. By the time she reached town, she was dusty and parched but determined. Her first stop was Abernathy's Mercantile, where Thomas had an outstanding account. Mr. Abernathy, a thin man with perpetually ink-stained fingers, received her coldly. "Mrs. Dawson," he acknowledged. "I presume you've come about your husband's debt." "I have," Scarlett confirmed. "I only just discovered the extent of our financial troubles. I'm hoping we can arrange a payment plan that—" "Mrs. Dawson," he interrupted, "your husband owes this establishment over $100. We extended credit in good faith, and he repaid us by skipping town with another man's wife." "I'm not inclined to be generous." "I understand your anger," Scarlett said carefully, "but I'm still here and I intend to honor his debts. I simply need time." "Time won't settle accounts," Abernathy replied coldly. "Unless you can make a substantial payment immediately, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action against the ranch." Similar conversations followed at the hardware store and with the blacksmith. By midday, Scarlett was verging on despair. Her last hope was Mr. Harmon, husband of the kind woman at the general store who served as an agent for the Territorial Bank. Mrs. Harmon greeted her warmly, but her expression fell when Scarlett asked to speak with her husband about the mortgage. "Oh dear," she said quietly. "Frank isn't here, but Scarlett, I should warn you. The bank sent a representative from Santa Fe yesterday. They're moving to foreclose on several properties in the territory, including yours." The floor seemed to drop from beneath Scarlett's feet. "Foreclose." "But I didn't even know about the mortgage until yesterday." Mrs. Harmon's face was a picture of sympathy. "I'm sorry, truly. Frank tried to argue your case, but the bank representative was adamant. They've given notice of 2 weeks before they take possession." 2 weeks. 14 days to somehow find enough money to save her home or face complete destitution. "Thank you for telling me," Scarlett managed, her voice hollow. "What will you do?" Mrs. Harmon asked gently. "I don't know," Scarlett admitted, "but I can't give up without trying." The walk back to the ranch felt twice as long, each step heavier than the last. As she approached the homestead, she noticed an unfamiliar horse tethered outside her house. Alarm coursed through her had the creditors already come to assess what they could claim. Scarlett approached cautiously, wishing she had thought to carry Thomas's pistol. As she neared the porch, the front door opened and Vincent Vega stepped out, relief flooded through her. "Vincent, what are you doing here?" He smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Came to check on you and Samson. Found your note saying you'd gone to town." "I didn't expect to see you again so soon," she said, climbing the steps to join him on the porch. "Delivery to the fort went faster than expected," he explained, "and I was." He hesitated, concerned. Something in his tone made Scarlett look at him more closely. "Why concerned?" Vincent sighed. "Word travels fast in small towns. I heard about Thomas's debts while delivering the cattle. When the banker from Santa Fe arrived yesterday, talking about foreclosures, I figured you might be among those affected." The reminder of her predicament brought fresh tears to Scarlett's eyes. She blinked them away furiously. "You heard correctly. I have 2 weeks before they take the ranch." Vincent's jaw tightened. "I suspected as much. How much is needed to stop the foreclosure?" "More than I could hope to raise," Scarlett said bitterly. "The mortgage alone is $500. Then there are the store accounts, the blacksmith altogether, nearly $700. It was a vast sum, more money than most cowboys saw in years of work. Vincent's expression confirmed what she already knew: there was no rescue coming. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Scarlett nodded, accepting the inevitable. "At least I had warning. I can pack my belongings, decide where to go next." "Where will you go?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "Back east, perhaps. I have a distant cousin in St. Louis who might take me in until I find work." Vincent was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured, as if he was choosing his words with great care. "There might be another option." Scarlett looked at him questioningly. "I've been saving," he continued. "Plan to buy a small spread in Texas next year. I've got nearly $800. Her breath caught. "Vincent, I couldn't possibly. Let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not offering it as a loan, I'm offering a partnership." "Partnership?" she repeated, confused. "This is good land," he said, gesturing to the ranch around them. "With work and proper management, it could be profitable. Cattle prices are high, and this valley has good water and grass." Scarlett stared at him. "You're suggesting we run the ranch together?" "I am," he confirmed. "We settle the debts, clear the title, and build something worth having." Equal partners. The proposition was so unexpected that Scarlett could barely process it. "But you don't know me, not really. Why would you risk everything you've saved on a failing ranch and a woman you met a week ago?" Vincent's gaze was steady. "I know enough. I know you're strong, determined, and honest. I know this land has potential, and I know that I haven't stopped thinking about you since I rode away yesterday." The last admission hung in the air between them, changing everything. Scarlett felt heat rise to her cheeks as she realized the implications of what he was truly offering: not just a business arrangement, but a chance at something more. "It's too soon," she protested weakly. "Thomas only left last week. People would talk." "People already talk," Vincent pointed out. "But I'm not suggesting anything improper. We'd be business partners until—" He paused. "Until we decide if we want to be more." "And if we don't?" Scarlett asked. "If it doesn't work between us, then we remain partners in the ranch, or one buys the other out," he said practically. "Either way, you keep your home and I get the land I've been saving for." It was a generous offer, perhaps too generous. "I need time to think," Scarlett said finally. Vincent nodded. "Of course, I'll be in town for the night. Send word to the hotel when you decide." After he departed, Scarlett paced the small house for hours, weighing her options. Vincent's proposition offered a chance to save her home and perhaps find happiness again. But was she ready to trust another man so soon after Thomas's betrayal? And what if Vincent, too, eventually tired of ranch life and the responsibilities it entailed? Yet when she imagined leaving, abandoning the land she'd worked so hard to tame, the animals that depended on her, the small but tangible life she'd built, her heart rebelled. This was her home, regardless of Thomas's name on the deed. She belonged here among the mesas and junipers under the vast New Mexico sky. By morning, her decision was made. She wrote a brief note and asked young Jamie, the blacksmith's son who had come to check on Samson, to deliver it to Vincent at the hotel. 2 hours later, Vincent arrived, his expression guarded as he dismounted. "You wanted to see me." "I did," Scarlett confirmed, leading him to the porch where she had set out coffee. "I've been thinking about your proposal, and I have conditions," she said firmly. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'm listening. First, everything must be legal and proper. We form a written partnership with clear terms, filed with a lawyer in Santa Fe." Vincent nodded. "Sensible. Second, we maintain separate living arrangements until—" She faltered slightly, "until circumstances change. I can move into the old bunkhouse." "I'll take the bunkhouse," Vincent countered. "You keep the house." "Third," Scarlett continued, "this is a true partnership. We make decisions together, work together, and share profits equally." "Agreed," Vincent said without hesitation. "And finally," she said, her voice softening, "we promise honesty between us always. No secrets, no hidden debts or entanglements." Vincent's gray eyes held her steadily. "I give you my word." "Then," Scarlett said, taking a deep breath, "I accept your offer, Mr. Vega." His smile transformed his face, revealing a dimple she hadn't noticed before. "I believe this calls for a proper handshake, partner." As they shook hands to seal their agreement, Scarlett felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope, bright and fragile as a spring blossom, but undeniably real. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Vincent arranged for the debts to be settled, earning them a grudging respect from Abiquiu's merchants who had assumed they would never see payment. The foreclosure was halted, and the mortgage renegotiated with more favorable terms. True to his word, Vincent moved into the old bunkhouse, repairing its leaky roof and broken windows to make it habitable. Together, they established a routine of shared work and separate evenings, maintaining propriety while slowly building a foundation of trust. With Vincent's knowledge of cattle and Scarlett's careful management of their resources, the ranch began to show signs of recovery. They purchased a small herd of 20 cattle as a starting point, focusing on breeding stock that would increase their holdings over time. Vincent constructed new corrals and repaired the well, while Scarlett expanded the vegetable garden and added a flock of turkeys to their poultry. The townspeople watched their partnership with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. Some, like Mrs. Harmon, supported their unconventional arrangement, recognizing the practical benefits for both parties. Others whispered behind their hands, suggesting impropriety despite the visible distance Vincent and Scarlett maintained in public. "Let them talk," Vincent said one evening as they sat on the porch after a day of branding their new calves. "They'll find something else to gossip about eventually." "I suppose," Scarlett sighed, acutely aware of the cool reception she'd received at church the previous Sunday. "I just wish they understood this is a business arrangement." Vincent was quiet for a moment, staring into the darkening sky. "Is that all it is to you?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken feelings that had been growing over their weeks together. Scarlett had come to admire not just Vincent's strength and work ethic, but his kindness, his quiet humor, and the gentle way he treated every living creature on the ranch. More than once she had caught herself watching him as he worked, appreciating the fluid grace of his movements and the rare smile that transformed his serious face. "No," she admitted finally. "It's become more than that, but I'm afraid, Vincent." "Of what?" "Of trusting too quickly. Of making the same mistake twice." She twisted her hands in her lap. "Thomas made promises too." "I'm not Thomas," Vincent said softly. "I know that," Scarlett assured him. "But how can I be sure my judgment isn't clouded? It's been such a short time." Vincent considered this. "Then we continue as we are. We work together, we build this ranch, and we give ourselves time." He reached across the space between their chairs and gently took her hand. "I'm not going anywhere, Scarlett. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." The simple promise, delivered without pressure or expectation, eased something inside her. She squeezed his hand in silent acknowledgement, and they sat together as the stars emerged overhead, comfortable in the shared silence. Summer gave way to autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and the golden transformation of the cottonwoods along the creek. The ranch prospered under their joint care, each day cementing their partnership and deepening their understanding of one another. Vincent revealed himself to be not just a skilled cowboy, but a man of unexpected depths. He could recite poetry learned from his schoolteacher mother, craft intricate leatherwork during evening hours, and play passable fiddle tunes on an instrument he had carried with him since leaving Pennsylvania. Scarlett, in turn, shared parts of herself she had kept hidden during her marriage to Thomas, her love of drawing, her dreams of one day raising horses instead of cattle, her secret hope of someday traveling to San Francisco to see the ocean. As October painted the landscape in russet and gold, a letter arrived that shattered their hard-won peace. It was addressed to Scarlett in unfamiliar handwriting, postmarked from Tucson, Arizona Territory. Scarlett opened it with Vincent watching from across the kitchen table where they were sharing breakfast. "It's from Thomas," she said, her voice hollow as she scanned the single page. Vincent's expression darkened. "What does he want?" "He's coming back," Scarlett whispered, hardly able to believe the words before her. "He says Lillian left him for a silver prospector. He wants to return home and reconcile our differences. He'll be here in 2 weeks." The blood drained from Vincent's face. "And what do you want?" It was the right question, the only question that mattered. Scarlett looked around the kitchen, at the home she and Vincent had rebuilt together, then at the man who had shown her what partnership truly meant. "I want him to go to hell," she said with sudden clarity. Vincent's startled laugh broke the tension. "That can be arranged." "I'm serious," Scarlett continued, crumpling the letter. "He abandoned me, left me drowning in debt, and now thinks he can simply return because his other woman left him. No, this isn't his home anymore. Legally, his name is still on the deed alongside yours," Vincent pointed out gently. "Even with our partnership agreement, he might have a claim." The realization sent a chill through her. Could Thomas really return and destroy everything they had built? "Then we need to see a lawyer," Scarlett decided. "Immediately." The next day, they rode to Santa Fe, a journey of several hours that brought them to the territorial capital as afternoon shadows lengthened across the plaza. Mr. Donovan, the attorney who had drawn up their partnership agreement, received them in his cluttered office, listening gravely to their predicament. "It's complicated," he admitted, tapping his fingers on Thomas's letter which Scarlett had brought as evidence. "Abandonment doesn't automatically dissolve a marriage, and Mr. Dawson could potentially claim a right to the property. Even though he left willingly, even though he took another woman," Scarlett asked incredulously. "The courts tend to favor husbands in property disputes," Donovan explained. "However, there might be a solution." He pulled a law book from his shelf and flipped through it. "New Mexico Territory follows common law regarding desertion. If you can prove he left with the intention of abandonment and failed to provide support for at least 1 year, you may be granted a divorce on those grounds with favorable property settlement." 1 year, Vincent repeated. "He'll be here in 2 weeks. Donovan frowned. "That does present a problem. What if he never reaches the ranch?" Scarlett asked suddenly. Both men looked at her in alarm. "I don't mean harm him," she clarified quickly. "But what if we convinced him to leave again, before he reasserts any claim?" Donovan considered this. "If he voluntarily abandons his claim to the property in writing, that would certainly strengthen your position." "And how do we convince a man to sign away his rights to valuable land?" Vincent asked skeptically. A slow smile spread across Scarlett's face. "I have an idea." The plan they formulated over the next days was audacious. Using the last of Vincent's savings, they purchased cattle from neighboring ranches, borrowing additional livestock to create the appearance of a much larger operation. They hired temporary hands from among Vincent's former cowboy companions, men who owed him favors from their trail days together. The ranch was transformed, fences mended, buildings painted, cattle grazing contentedly on the autumn golden grass. When Thomas Dawson rode up to what had once been his homestead, exactly 2 weeks after his letter arrived, he found not the struggling widow he expected but a thriving ranch operation. Cowboys moved purposefully between corrals. A new windmill pumped water into a large tank, and the house itself stood freshly painted in the late October sun. Scarlett watched from the porch as her husband dismounted, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion. He had aged in the month since his departure, his face more lined, his frame thinner, his clothes showing signs of hard travel and harder living. "Scarlett," he called, approaching cautiously as if uncertain of his welcome. She remained seated, forcing him to climb the steps to her. "Thomas," she acknowledged coolly. He removed his hat, revealing hair that had receded further in his absence. "You're looking well," he offered, his eyes taking in her neat appearance and the prosperous scene around them. "The ranch, too. Did you come into money?" "In a manner of speaking," Scarlett replied. "I found a partner." As if summoned by her words, Vincent emerged from the barn, leading a magnificent black stallion that they had borrowed specifically for this charade. He handed the reins to one of the temporary hands and strode toward the house with the easy confidence of a man on his own property. Thomas stiffened as Vincent mounted the steps and took a position beside Scarlett's chair. "Thomas Dawson," Vincent said, his voice neutral but his eyes cold. "We've been expecting you." "Who the hell are you?" Thomas demanded. Vincent Vega, Scarlett's business partner, and he glanced at her, his expression softening momentarily. "Friend." "Business partner," Thomas repeated incredulously. "This is my ranch, is it?" Scarlett stood, facing her husband directly. "You abandoned it and me, leaving behind nothing but debt and broken promises. Mr. Vega and I have since established a profitable partnership that saved this property from foreclosure." Thomas paled. "Foreclosure?" "Yes, Thomas." The bank was 2 weeks from taking everything when Vincent offered a solution. "He paid off the mortgage, the outstanding accounts in town, everything you left behind." "With what? Cowboy wages?" Thomas scoffed, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. Vincent smiled thinly. "Family money. My uncle's estate in Pennsylvania. I was looking for the right investment." It was a lie, but one Thomas couldn't disprove. He looked around again at the bustling ranch, visibly recalculating his position. "Well," he said finally, attempting to regain control, "I appreciate your assistance during my absence, but as Scarlett's husband, I'm back now to resume my place." "No," Scarlett said simply. "You're not welcome here, Thomas," his expression darkened. "This is my home, my property, actually," Vincent interrupted, producing a document from his vest pocket. "Mr. Donovan in Santa Fe prepared this for your consideration. It's a dissolution of marriage and property settlement." Thomas snatched the paper, scanning it with growing outrage. "You expect me to sign away my rights to everything? For what? A pittance?" "For $500, Vincent corrected him. "Cash, more than you left Scarlett with." Thomas laughed bitterly. "You must think me a fool. This ranch is worth far more, especially now." "Perhaps," Scarlett acknowledged. "But consider your alternatives, Thomas. You can fight us in court, where we'll present evidence of your abandonment, your debts, and your moral failings. It would be a lengthy process, during which you'd have nowhere to live and no means of support." She paused, letting the reality of his situation sink in. "Or you can take the money and start fresh somewhere else, perhaps in California, where I hear opportunities abound." Thomas looked between them, measuring the determination in their faces against his own desperate circumstances. Scarlett could see the calculation in his eyes. He had returned hoping for shelter and sustenance, not a legal battle he couldn't afford to fight. "I need time to think," he said finally. "You have until tomorrow morning," Vincent replied firmly. "The offer expires then." That night, Thomas slept in the bunkhouse, separated from the hired hands who watched him with undisguised hostility, all part of the performance Vincent had orchestrated. Scarlett and Vincent sat late into the evening on the porch, speaking in low voices about contingencies should Thomas refuse their offer. "We could still pursue the divorce through the courts," Vincent suggested. "Donovan seemed confident we'd eventually prevail." "Eventually," Scarlett emphasized. "But how long would that take? And how much more money?" Vincent took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the passing months. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Morning brought Thomas to the porch, unshaven and hollow-eyed from a night of deliberation. He found Scarlett and Vincent waiting, the settlement papers between them on a small table. "I'll sign," Thomas announced without preamble, "but I want $600. $500 was our offer," Vincent said firmly. "It's fair compensation for a man who abandoned his responsibilities." Thomas's gaze flicked to Scarlett. "Is that all our marriage was worth to you? $500? "Our marriage ended the day you rode away with Lillian Moore," Scarlett replied, unmoved by his attempt at emotional manipulation. "This is simply making it official." For a long moment, Thomas stared at her, perhaps seeing for the first time the woman she had become in his absence stronger, more confident, and completely beyond his influence. "Fine," he said at last, reaching for the pen Vincent offered. $500. With a flourish, Thomas signed both copies of the agreement. Vincent countersigned as witness, then counted out $500 in notes and coins, the last of their combined resources, but worth every penny to secure their future. "I suggest the morning stage to Santa Fe," Vincent said as he handed over the money. "It passes through Abiquiu in 2 hours. Thomas pocketed the cash, his expression a mixture of resentment and relief. "You've changed, Scarlett." "Yes," she agreed simply. "I have." Without another word, Thomas Dawson placed his hat on his head, descended the porch steps, and mounted his tired horse. He did not look back as he rode away, becoming a diminishing figure against the rising sun, a mirror image of his departure months earlier. Only when he had disappeared from view did Scarlett release the breath she'd been holding. "Is it really over?" "It is," Vincent confirmed, the document safe in his hands. "Once Donovan files these papers, you'll be free." "We'll be free," she corrected him. "This is our ranch now, truly ours." Vincent's smile was gentle as he turned to face her. "Scarlett, there's something I need to ask you," her heart quickened. "Yes, the partnership has worked well," he began carefully, "but I've been thinking about a more permanent arrangement. What did you have in mind?" Scarlett asked, though she already had known for weeks, perhaps months. Vincent took both her hands in his. "I'm asking if you might consider, when the divorce is final and proper time has passed, becoming my wife. Not because of the ranch or practicality, but because I've fallen in love with you." The simple declaration, spoken without embellishment or pretense, brought tears to Scarlett's eyes. "Vincent, you don't need to answer now," he added quickly. "I know it's soon, and after everything with Thomas." "Yes," she interrupted, squeezing his hands. "My answer is yes." Vincent's expression transformed with surprised joy. "You're certain?" "More certain than I've ever been," Scarlett assured him. "You showed me what true partnership means, what respect and kindness look like in a man's eyes. You helped me when I had nothing to offer in return except work and determination." "You offered far more than that," Vincent corrected her gently. "You gave me a home, a purpose beyond endless cattle drives. You showed me that building something lasting is more satisfying than wandering." As the morning sun bathed them in golden light, Vincent drew her closer. "May I kiss you, Scarlett Dawson, for the first time but not the last?" "Please," she whispered, lifting her face to his. Their lips met in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise, the beginning of a new chapter neither had expected when fate brought them together on a dusty street in Abiquiu. The following spring, after Thomas's desertion had legally freed Scarlett and the ranch had survived the winter under their joint care, they were married in a simple ceremony beneath the cottonwood trees beside the creek. Mrs. Harmon wept openly. Mr. Donovan served as witness, and Vincent's former trail companions provided a guard of honor on horseback. As Vincent placed a simple gold band on Scarlett's finger, he repeated the words that had first given her hope in her darkest moment. "You deserve better than his shadow. You deserve the sun." Under the vast New Mexico sky, surrounded by the land they had reclaimed together, Scarlett knew she had found not just a partner but a love that would endure long after the shadows had faded into memory. In the years that followed, the Vega ranch prospered. They added horses to their cattle operation, fulfilling Scarlett's dream of breeding fine saddle stock that became sought after throughout the territory. Their family grew to include 2 sons and a daughter, all raised to value honesty, hard work, and the unbreakable bond between partners who face life's challenges side by side. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the day's work complete, Scarlett and Vincent would sit together on the porch that had witnessed both her abandonment and her redemption. As the stars emerged overhead and coyotes called in the distance, she would reflect on the strange twist of fate that had transformed the worst day of her life into the first step toward her greatest happiness. "Any regrets?" Vincent would sometimes ask, his arm warm around her shoulders. And Scarlett, looking out over the land they had built into a legacy, would shake her head and answer truthfully, "Not a single one."